Hello, everyone. I'm Helen McGrath, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance. And I'm joined this week for the vlog by Dennis Hall, our Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everybody.
So, Dennis, what have you got for us this week?
Well, Helen, this week I think it's something that's a little mysterious, something that's too difficult to describe precisely, something every local authority should be concerned about. What is it? Offlog. No, not the new regulator of the timber industry. And it joins another set of organisations with a similar name. Ofcom, Ofgem, Ofsted, Ofwad, and now we've got Offlog. But what is it? And what is it intended to do, more importantly? We don't have all the answers today, I don't think, but our discussion may possibly enlighten at least some of our members. Because the Office for Local Government, Offlog, was announced by government in July 2023, and we don't think it's yet begun operations. There is accompanying draft guidance on the best value duty, and there's been a consultation about what quantifiable metrics would be appropriate for Offlog to consider. Now, to the business. Offlog is not a statutory body or a non-departmental public body. It's an office within DLUC. It's a performance body, according to them, which will provide authoritative and accessible data and analysis about the performance of local government and support its improvement. Well, that's the official message about it. But Helen, there remains some mystery around Offlog. What do you think?
Yes, there does. And I like the way that you pronounce DLUC as opposed to DLUC. I'm not sure anybody really knows how one's supposed to pronounce it, but I'm going to try DLUC. Sounds quite.
That's my Geordie twist on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what does Offlog actually do? Well, we do know that Josh Goodman, who's the interim chief executive of Offlog, wrote to chief executives of local authorities in England, providing an update on the overall next steps for Offlog and seeking their views on the next set of draft metric for their what they're calling their local authority data explorer. So what they say is that's to ensure that warning signs of potential serious failure are spotted and addressed as early as possible. They want to find new ways to spot and address what they say are early warning signs of potential failure, and therein lies the rub, I think, how you measure that. But they've been quite clear that they want to do that in a way that complements, not duplicates, the work of DLUC or the LGA, I suspect the Ombudsman and others. So missed opportunity for organisational improvement, that's been raised as something by chief executives that Offlog should consider a range of options on. And they say in the short term, over the coming months, that they plan to organise some targeted webinars involving small groups of local authorities with, say, similar characteristics to share experiences and approaches to delivering particular services. And that in the longer term, they hope to extend to offering new analytical insights and reports on good practice and expert support to help the utilisation of data to improve performance. Now, one thing that stands out there is this reports on good practice. How far is that going to go? What will those reports look like? You know, what will they entail in terms of how binding they are on local authorities? And Offlog, of course, have been set up under DLUC. I can't pronounce that the way you do. I'm going back to the original. It's going to be vitally important that there's a strong perception of impartiality here. Else, you know, trust will be affected, and I remain unconvinced that Offlog will be able to wave a magic wand, especially in relation to finance, which will somehow, you know, miraculously resolve the underfunding of local authorities, which has been a situation ongoing for many years. Now, Dennis, on the theme of finance, do you see Offlog as being a new audit commission?
Well, I think that is the central question, Helen. I think commentators within local authorities, within local government, are concerned about how this new body is going to evolve, how it's going to develop. And, you know, some of the concerns is around that very name, Offlog, because when you look at other organisations, those that I've mentioned, Ofgem, particularly Ofsted, that we discussed in the grapevine earlier, all of these have regulatory functions. They're not merely collectors of information. And secondly, The other concern, the recent concern, is Oflog has just appointed Lord Amias Morse, who was formerly the Comptroller General and the Chief of the National Audit Office. Now, he was quite controversial, a strong leader, quite outspoken leader. He might be somebody who would be interested in taking the new organisation towards an audit commission type organisation. At this stage, I'm simply not sure that that might happen. There could be pressure in time, though, for something like an audit commission type role to develop from Oflog. And that is something that leaders in local government would not wish to see. They would hold to the view that there is ample local transparency, transparency through scrutiny, but there are fears that that might happen. The other fear is that the new organisation might take over best value roles within DLUC and start exercising some of the statutory powers that are currently exercised by the department. And again, this is something local government leaders would not want. But the main concern is how it will evolve. And I think leaders, again, are looking for assurance about how the body will work. And bear in mind, as you said earlier, I think all of those things that Oflog is intended to do will require cooperation from local authorities. They don't want to be alienated at the outset by this and how it might develop.
Well, no, certainly not. And if you look at the data that they're actually currently looking at, it's quite interesting. So they've got the Data Explorer up.
Yes,
so that you could just look at the areas. And at the moment, it's concentrated on adult social care, adult skills, finance, and interestingly, waste management. Now, it seems to me that there are probably some competing departmental demands within government. It's not just DLUC. All the departments will want input and be able to obtain statistical data. So I think one of the concerns has to be that it could become unwieldy and burdensome. And there's a potential for overlap with the Ombudsman complaint data, although Oflog have said that they're alive to that. But I think, one really needs to understand the purpose of metrics and whether or not it will be effective. So, for instance, I do know that people have been discussing, call-in numbers. Would the number of call-ins be useful? Well, a call-in is not necessarily a determinative of a failing council. Actually, it can be a very positive thing for open and effective governance and debate. And conversely, if you take, say, the number of FOI breaches, for instance, obviously not all of those are reported to the Information Commissioner. So if a local authority, was required to give data in relation to internal FOI breaches that don't quite meet that threshold, what would that do to the behaviour of people working in local government? Would that be more inclined then? Would there be more cases of sort of non-reporting and cover-ups through fear of what would happen if that data was obtained and then released? So now you mentioned earlier, Dennis, about the department bearing some similarity potentially to Ofsted, and could Oflog have a regulatory role in relation to local authorities?
Well, I think this is the concern, and you've touched on the central question once again in what you've said. Some of the assessments that could be made based on the information that's collected could, in the end, prove to be a disincentive to local government, and I think some of the judgments that might be made on the information that's collected could be wrong or misleading. And that's the whole danger in this, even without a regulatory function, which on what we've seen, it isn't intended that will happen. But the worry amongst the leaders in local government is that is how it will develop. But the judgments that will be taken from this evidence, from this information that's collected, are the central issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I mean, to be fair, Oflog have recognised that data alone is rarely enough to assess a local authority's performance and often needs context via further investigation, including talking to people who understand the local area. And they have said that they want to make it clear to all users of the Data Explorer, and they say both citizens and the media, so that they do not over-interpret the data that's published. But ultimately, I think that is highly likely to occur. And my biggest fear, Dennis, is that this becomes some sort of super league table of well-performing local authorities, in the same way that we've seen in schools.
Yeah. And the other thing is, those tables, as we know, don't tell you why a local authority is at a particular journey in its development or in its performance and so forth. the results are not necessarily the full picture.
No, absolutely not. So on that note, thank you for talking to me today. And if you want to know more about local authority law and practice, please do listen to the LLG Grapevine podcast.